Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Build Your Chops with Mallet Percussion Workout, featuring Kristen Shiner McGuire. My name is Heather Meyer and I will be running everything in the background for our session today. So let's get things started. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Kristen Shiner McGuire. Kristen Shiner McGuire is Associate Professor in Performance Practice, is the Coordinator of Percussion Studies and Program Director for Music Business at Nazareth College School of Music, where she has taught since 1984. Her awards include the 2021 Distinction in Teaching Award, the 2016 Monroe County School Music Association Richard Snook Award for Outstanding Contributions to Music Education, and the 1998 Nazareth College Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching Award. The Nazareth College Percussion Ensemble has performed at state and national conventions and in schools across New York State. Kristen holds a Bachelor of Music degree with highest honors from the University of Illinois, a master's degree in percussion performance, and a performer's certificate from the Eastman School of Music. From 1980-81, she was a marimba student of marimba virtuoso Keiko Abe at the Toho School of Music in Tokyo, Japan. Her other teachers include John Beck, Thomas Siway, Jim Petersak, Keith Copeland, and Jamie Haddad. For today's webinar, she will be assisted by Nazareth College Music Education major, Alyssa Dinsmore. Kristen and Alyssa, thanks so much for being with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like to give a special thank you to Alfred Publishing and to Heather for hosting this for us. This is really exciting to be able to present on my book, and I'm so glad that you're here this afternoon. So we're going to be talking about the book I wrote several years ago called Mallet Percussion Workout. And why did I write it? It's a corollary book to a mallet method. So method books certainly have lots of melodies and patterns to practice, and you can work on your reading, but they don't answer all the questions that kept coming up for my students. You know, I was a private teacher for a long time, and I've been here at Nazareth for close to 40 years. So I needed to fill in some gaps with the areas that weren't covered in method books. So it's a corollary book to a method book. And it's called a workout because I've actually figured out kind of a plan of a way you can work out on any mallet percussion instrument, whether it's bells or vibraphone or marimba or xylophone, and really get your chops together and some other essential elements, including reading music. So I wanted to first just show you what the workout, or how to use this book, is. And first, you're going to use the tools. There are three main tools that I have here. Number one is a metronome. Number two is a pencil. And number three is your voice. So a metronome is a very important tool because it helps ingrain a steady pulse. It also keeps you from rushing if you tend to rush. And it helps you play consistently. You can also sort of test your abilities by changing the metronome marking as well. And then it also keeps you in meter if you're reading music. You need a pencil to analyze your music, which is very important before you start playing. You want to know what the piece is about, what key it's in, are there any repeats, that sort of thing. And your voice, certainly. We're fortunate as percussionists that we're not blowing into something or singing, and so we can use our voice to count while we play. And I think it's a very useful tool and very helpful. You can also use your voice to say the names of the notes on an arpeggio, for example. So what you need to play mallet instruments with ease, you need mechanical understanding and ability. You need to be able to see a variety of patterns ascending and descending. You need to play evenly and fluidly, and be able to play patterns and then music while only looking at the music, and that's the tricky part. So the skills that you're going to develop by using this book are an even single stroke roll, which should just come from your basis as a snare drummer on using a drum pad. Creating and assigning good sticking. This is one of the elements that's missing from the method books. Creating a relaxed full stroke. Being able to name the patterns that you're playing, and being able to sight read. And so the last section here is your daily workout, kind of like going to the gym. If you do several things and you do them each week, you're going to keep fit. What I'm recommending is that you do every day, or at least every week, a certain number of times, a warm-up. You can use that your drum pad to start with, and then go on to the mallet instrument. Do some scale and arpeggio patterns, a roll exercise, and then a focus exercise. So we're going to start with mechanics. This is Alyssa Dinsmore. She's a rising sophomore here at Nazareth, and she's going to be in music education, one of our finest students, and she's played in the women's orchestra with me, and she's also going to be running a drum circle this summer for a leadership camp for young girls. So I'm going to have Alyssa demonstrate some of the mechanical parts. Mechanics are extremely important because the bars are so narrow. It's not like a giant drum. You have to be precise in hitting those bars, so everything we do with our bodies and the height of the instrument is very important. So the first thing is the height. The height should be just a little bit below your waist, so when you bring up your mallets, just show them that they're going to be comfortably a little bit less than parallel with the floor. Okay, so if the instrument is too low, you're going to end up pointing your wrist downward. If the instrument is too high, you won't be able to make a correct stroke from your wrist. So this is a height adjustable instrument. If you need to make yours height adjustable, you can put your instrument on blocks, and I do recommend that. If you're super, super tall, you can actually practice sitting down, believe it or not. You don't get as much side-to-side motion, but if you're only doing like a couple octaves for your scales, you could sit down. So let's do the mechanics. The first thing, we've established a good instrument height, and now we're going to do the stance and the body movement. So I use an old-fashioned concept at the beginning of the book called a typewriter carriage. A typewriter carriage moves consistently across the page like this, and so your stance should be, your feet should be apart, and then you should be able to, I called it leaning in the book, but it's actually more like lunging. So if you watch Alyssa, she's standing with her feet apart, and what she's trying to do is push or make sure that her torso and her mallets are directly above the area of the keyboard that she's going to be striking. So one of the problems can be if you're standing, let's say, at the lower end and you're trying to reach up to play the upper end, there's not as much chance you're going to hit the right notes. It's much better to be in the middle of that, okay? The next thing is the grip. It's pretty natural to grip the sticks just like a snare drum sticks, but sometimes the most common mistake is to point the fingers, and because we desire tactile sense, a lot of people will, starting off, might press the mallets into the bars. Make sure that you're not doing that. You're more like holding handlebars. Again, if you've played snare drum, it's basically the same grip, but we're not going to squeeze quite as tightly on the front because we're not going to be doing things like buzz rolls. All right, and then the hinge is right in the center of the wrist. So that's very important that the mallets go straight up and down, again, because the keys are very narrow. You want to make sure you can strike them correctly. Now we'll go to the full stroke. If you've worked on drum corps, you know there's types of strokes. We have the downstroke, the upstroke, tap. The only type of stroke we're going to use, at least for right now, is called the full stroke, and there's a little picture in the book where it starts high and comes back up. So if you could just demonstrate the full stroke for us, just on a C. Excellent. So you notice she's starting with her mallets up here and coming back up again. Why don't you take a C scale and play it just with your right hand and use a full stroke. I recommend doing one hand at a time, just like you do on the snare drum. So C scale with one hand, and this is demonstrating the full stroke. Nice, and descend a little bit faster this time. Excellent. So there's the mechanical reason for the full stroke, and it's just the easiest way to strike the mallet straight down, but it also has to do with the tone. So with all percussion instruments, you want to pull the sound out of the instrument. Now the last thing we'll talk about in terms of mechanics is the mallet positioning. If you play snare drum, you probably use a V, which looks like this. If you've played a couple timpani, you know if you're going to put your mallets above the beating spot, the V is going to be like this. For mallet percussion, we're going to be using a T shape. Let's hold our mallets up. So this is the left hand T, and this is the right hand T. All right, what that allows you to do is to be able to scoot up and down the keyboard without having one mallet hop over the other one. So again, I'm going to have Alyssa just play the C scale. This is a left hand T, so what's different about this from playing snare drum is her elbow is actually going to stick out a little bit more, the left elbow, to make sure that one mallet heads over the next one. Very nice. Okay. Now, in practicing the T position, I'm going to go a little bit faster on the F scale. So I would start with the right hand T for the F scale because I know I'm going to hit the B flat. All right. But when you go to 2 octaves, what you notice is the T position is going to shift. So I'm going to start with the right T. Now I'm going to change to the left T. Left T, back to the right T. And it's that sort of positioning or planning the positioning that allows you to go smoothly across the keyboard. All right. So the full stroke exercise, Alyssa's already demonstrated, so just doing one hand at a time. Let's do another one. Well, we're going to switch keys. We're going to try to keep switching keys so you get used to all different key signatures and not just getting stuck on C, for example. How about the key of A major? Do 4 hits on each note, ascend for 1 octave. So this works on the full stroke, and it also helps you learn the scale. So left 4 and then right 4. Thank you. One reason I have people repeat the hand is I've noticed that when people play alternating, that's the wrong way to play. Okay, those are downstrokes. So when you alternate, you have to be careful to keep that full stroke. So I recommend going really slowly. So a nice warm up and down your scales. I'll show you at the end. We have the circle of keys is included in the book, so you can practice in that circle and you can change the patterns as you go. All right, let's go on to rolls. So there are many rolls in, of course, melodies that you find in method books, in solos and orchestra and band parts, but it's a particular skill that is probably one of the most important skills for percussionists, right? If you're a snare drummer, you have to have a good roll. But how do you learn to get a good roll? Like it's not necessarily falling after being able to play a scale doesn't mean you can do this. Right? You have to play really quickly and stay very relaxed. So we need specific exercises just to work on the roll. And if you look at your method book, often rolls are not introduced till maybe the 2nd or 3rd chapter. So the most prevalent problem with the rolls is that the wrist and the arm are kind of tense. So working on the relaxation is very important. And then learning to change direction is really important. So I have several roll exercises in here that you can do each day. Even if you just do them for 5 minutes, you're going to work on those skills. So I'm going to have Alyssa do the roll exercise that she's going to lead up the C scale, and she's just going to go up in 16th notes, but at the top of the scale she's going to add a little triplet which will allow her to lead up with the right hand and then lead down with the left. You want to make sure that both hands can lead. Great. And this actually leads to a more advanced skill. At first we practice measured rolls like that because basically if you want to stay in time, a measured roll is good. So you can think of like 30-second notes or maybe sextuplets. But when you're playing, let's say, a legato piece, if it's a transcription of something that was normally played like on a wind instrument, something, or maybe a vocal piece, you have to be able to change the speed of your roll and change the the lead hand. So being able to speed up the roll and slowing it down is very important for expression. That's sort of the final step. We're going to, in the roll exercises, we're going to work with measured rolls, but eventually you're going to want to go to an unmeasured roll. So here's one more measured roll exercise. This teaches you to change the lead hand each time. So most of us will naturally choose to lead with our dominant hand. For me, I'm a right hand dominant. I would say majority of people may be right hand dominant, so they tend to play all the rolls with the right hand. And what happens is it sometimes makes the music choppy if the left hand is going to be a little bit closer. So in order to practice changing the lead hand, you need an odd number of notes. So I've chosen 3-4 or 3-8 in triplets, so triplet, 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 triplet. And that will allow me to change the lead hand each time. So I'm going to start very slowly. I'm going to stay in the key of C again. I'm going to start with my left hand, and I'm going to do 3 beats of triplets, and then I'm going to do melodic thirds. So my right hand will end up leading up, and my left hand leading down. Right, left, right, left, okay? I'm going to go faster. And by the time you've sped it up, let's say over several weeks, breathing, staying relaxed, you've actually gotten to a nice roll speed and you're able to change your lead hand. Okay, so let's go to now the another area that's not usually addressed in a solo is what sticking do I use? So some of you may choose a solo, maybe for Solo Fest, but it's sometimes the sticking it's very tricky to figure it out because we often play music that's not written for a mallet keyboard instrument. It's not written in, or if it's written for violin, for example, or another transcription, it was played on a different instrument, so the sticking may not lay easily on the keyboard, so we have to do some problem solving. So what I've included in the book is a list of sticking guidelines, and notice I'm not using rules because they're not absolute every time. I break the guidelines sometimes depending on the musical passage. But I'm going to have Heather put up page 12, and this is going to show a section of a piece. There we go. I'm not sure if I forgot to have her show the table of contents, if that was up earlier or not. But maybe we can do that at the end if I forgot to ask about that. So thank you. So we've highlighted this. I got permission to use this segment from the Bach A minor. This is the 3rd page of movement 1, which is very tricky, especially if you haven't figured out how to do sticking. So we're going to use the first 3 sticking guidelines. Number 1 is just take a passage and start with one hand, alternate all the way through, take the same passage, alternate with the other hand, and just see where that lies, starting with alternating, and then we'll go to put the doubles in. So are you going to start with your left?
I will start with left lead.
Okay,
yep.
So she's going to take this passage, which is a sequence, at a slow tempo, using all alternating notes. So we're not using the sticking that's written there. Make sure to watch Alyssa and see what it looks like if she just alternates her hands. All right, how did that feel?
That is very awkward.
Yes, it's extremely awkward, right? Okay, so your mallets are almost crossing. She's trying really hard not to cross them. Okay, yeah. So I would call that not natural sticking for that.
Definitely not.
For that passage. So the next step is to try it with the right hand lead, just to sort of check all the boxes. So right hand lead on this passage. Notice the cross.
Yeah, that's very awkward.
Right. So the second half of the passage is okay.
It's
but
nice,
first,
yeah, but the first is there's a big leap
cross
there, yeah.
All right, so we're going to my the 3rd guideline is putting doubles in, and if you're familiar with paradiddles, it's kind of like doing a diddle, but we want to do that ideally on a weak beat so we maintain the agogic accent. So she's going to use the sticking now that I've marked in, which puts a double in a couple places so the mallets land on the keys in a much more natural position.
Yeah, that's way more natural. Yeah.
Yes, nicely done. And just speaking of sequences, you know, I said you need a pencil. It's very important to mark your music if there's a passage that is similar, like it's the same shape but on different notes. That's called a sequence. And it's good to bracket those on your music, because once you've figured out the sticking for one sequence, usually the next one it's easier to do with the same sticking. And that also helps you learn it a little more easily. You have any other comments about the sticking process that you've gone through?
Nope, just making sure you try everything and then find something that works for you and is comfortable.
Right. Yeah, I would say, and that's very common in my lessons with students. I'll have them figure out what they think works, and then I'll usually work with them, you know, usually like for the first couple of years, and then after a while, they can figure out their own,
Yeah.
pretty much. But it is good to check in on that. Okay, really nice. All right, let's do the third type of pattern. So, the two main patterns that we play pretty much on every melodic instrument, or as vocalists, I would say too, are scales and arpeggios. So scales are connected notes, arpeggios have skips in them. But there's a third very common pattern. It's actually in this same Bach piece, and I call it a turnaround. It doesn't have anything to do with a 2-5-1 progression. It's a 4-note pattern that has a little skip at the end of it. So can you do the turnaround in C for us?
Sure.
Beautiful. So nice smooth ascent and descent. She went a little bit faster on the way back, and it's kind of hard to see with this angle, but she's using a T, and the T position is very important because that's going to help you scoot up and down the keyboard. So when I'm practicing my patterns, let's say I'm going to spend 7 to 10 minutes on my patterns a day for my workout, I want to make sure that I do 1 or 2 scales, 1 or 2 arpeggios, and then do the turnaround. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like in the key of E flat. So here's where it gets tricky, but it's very applicable to a piece of music. And it also helps you work with alternating sticking when you're going from one manual to the next. So the naturals are called the lower manual, and the sharps and flats are the upper manual. So I'm going to take that same 4-note pattern and I'm going to play it in E flat. You'll see that my elbows have to move a lot, but the more I practice that, the easier it is to play music. And I'll go a little faster on the way down. I guarantee that will help you play at least tonal music. All right. So, why is reading music on this instrument so difficult? All our students struggle with it. And I would say the typical scenario would be, how many of you do this out there? You look at a passage of music, for those of you who have tried to read, let's say a bell part or a xylophone part in band or something like that. So you look at the music, you memorize a couple bars, you play those 2 bars, you look up, and then you're like, where am I? You're lost, right? Typical thing that happens, right, with mallet percussion music. So over time, it is possible to teach yourself how to just look at the music and not look down at your hands, or ultimately look up most of the time and then flip your eyes down really quickly, but be able to keep your place. So there's a significant portion of this book that is developed to help everybody become a better reader. And just to give you the confidence, like if you were sitting at your computer and you really didn't want to have to look down or type like this with your pointer fingers, you want to know where the keyboard is, you would have to discipline yourself for a while, maybe a couple weeks, to just not look down and feel your way around the keyboard. Now the problem is with, let's say with piano, for example, which is also keyboard, or the typing, is you actually have tactile sense. That means your fingers are, they're touching the keys on the piano, for example. So you have that tactile sense that helps you memorize what that feels like, even when you're reading music. This is one of the most difficult instruments to play the correct notes on at first because of the lack of tactile sense. So we need to use what's called muscle memory instead. We're actually going to use a combination of peripheral vision and muscle memory. And if you practice those exercises daily, you can imagine that maybe at the end of 1 or 2 months or so, you would start to really be able to get around the keyboard without having to stare at it. And that's what these focus exercises and sight reading skills are for in my book. We're going to start with a focus exercise, and I'm going to have Alyssa do this. She's going to play the exercise number 1 in C. Oh, there we have the sheet. Thank you for remembering, Heather. So you can see I'm describing what a focus exercise is. Just take a minute to look at that. And you will need those 4 things: your peripheral vision, awareness, consistency, and patience. And let me tell you, patience is the hardest thing for all of us, right? We always want to play it right. We want to play it fast. And that's another reason that using the metronome is really helpful. So setting a really slow tempo when you do any exercises or do any reading, that's very helpful. And the other thing is to not judge yourself, but to just observe. So the best way to practice is to sort of like step away from yourself a little bit and just as if you were watching yourself practice, and not get upset when you play a wrong note. Just notice, did I hit too far or too close? Because you're trying to develop that skill. So now let's focus on Alyssa's playing this focus exercise. I'm going to get out of her way. So the first exercise, she's actually going to look at the note C. This is a focus exercise in C. She's not going to hyper focus on C. She's going to generally focus on C, but I think if you try it while you're sitting there at your computer, if you just look down a little bit and move your hands to the right and left, you notice you can see your hands with your peripheral vision. Okay, so she's going to be using her peripheral vision leading up with the right, and then she's going to go down to the left. So she's not going to look, but if she plays a wrong note, she's either going to say too far or too close, and then try it again to get a sense to feel how far apart the notes are. Left T. So this one, the left hand has to find its way. This means you want to use your peripheral vision to the left. All right, and this time if you do too far or too close, maybe stay on that interval. This is what I would recommend, is maybe hanging out on that perfect fourth for a while to see how far does that feel. Okay.
Wow, okay.
I think she just surprised herself,
I
right?
definitely did, yep.
Well, there was nothing to correct there, but so the next step, this is developing sight reading skill that I want to spend some time on, and I'll show you what I have in the back of my book. I'm going to take Alyssa through the steps. So this is what I highly recommend you do every day, even just a few minutes. It's going to get your eyes off of the keyboard, up into something in front of you. And normally we're going to have a music stand there. I suggest that you put your music stand, I'll just show you how low it should be and then I'll move it back. It should be as low to the keyboard as you can, unless you're super tall. Okay, so almost touching the keyboard like this, because the lower the stand is, the more your peripheral vision you'll be able to use. So we're going to pretend that that stand is there. And I've included something to give your eyes a place to focus on. And so this is called a focus sheet. So in the back of the book, I have that. So you can put that on the stand, and it's a dot with some shaded areas around it, just to remind yourself to keep your eyes up there, but not to hyper focus on that, so you can still use your peripheral vision. So you can invent your own focus exercises. They can be in any key. Let's do the key of, how about the key of D? Okay, so these are the 4 steps creating your own focus exercise. And these are going to be patterns that you know already, but you're going to teach yourself to have confidence in not looking down at the keyboard. All right, so let's do the first 5 notes. We're going to keep it a small scale or small area. First 5 notes of the key of D, okay, 4 times in a row at whatever speed, and she's going to look at the keyboard. Beautiful. So step 1, your own tempo. Now, step 2 is you must play half that tempo. Again, that metronome may help here. And this time I'm going to have Alyssa kind of look around here where the stand would be, and still be aware of how far her hands are moving, and also use her peripheral vision. So half the speed of that. See if you can do it 4 times looking at the dot.
Okay.
She's developed some confidence there. That's great. I know. And I like to stay with small patterns like that, and always put your music stand right in front of the area that you're playing, so you can also use more peripheral vision. Now, we're going to make it a little more difficult this time. We're going to put skips in there. So usually we start with connected note patterns, all right, which are scales. Arpeggios are a little bit trickier to hit the right notes on. Let's do a D arpeggio slowly 4 times, looking. Let's just do it twice just for now.
Okay.
Twice looking at the keyboard, okay, at your own tempo. Great. Now I'm going to have her do the same thing, looking here, approximating where that stand should be at half the tempo, and use the judgment or the non-judgment, the observation this time. So if you miss a note, say too close or too far, and then try it again. Great. Just not making enough mistakes.
I know,
today,
weird. Weird.
And the other pattern, if you've done solo faster, melodic thirds are also very common. You know, that's another pattern that will help you see the scales and arpeggios, but break them up into different patterns. So the melodic thirds would be this. And then that was looking at the keyboard. So now I'm going to put my eyes right here, and I'm just using my peripheral vision. All right, so I'm going to go at half speed when I'm doing that. So you can pick any of those patterns, any key, and I would set, like, just say, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 to 7 minutes, or if you have more time to do that, do it for 10 minutes a day, and you're going to develop confidence in not looking down at the keyboard. Again, if you're using a good method book is one that starts in one place. It has a good learning sequence where the notes would be connected in scalar patterns, and then gradually branching out into arpeggiated patterns, but going in a systematic way. If you use the 2 books together, you should be very successful at that. Okay. Let's see. Do you have any wisdom from your point of view as a student who's like, I know that your sight reading has definitely improved, like, over this first year.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Tell us kind of about your process, or do you have any wisdom for the other students out there?
Honestly, I found that, like, every time I was in a practice room, which is basically every day, I would set aside 5 minutes to just do something, because a lot of people will just be like, it's okay, I don't need to do it. But if you were regimented in doing something every day, it definitely will improve your skills. And I mean, I wasn't making mistakes on the D major arpeggio, so I think I've been doing something right. So.
Yeah, right. And so
Yeah.
when you said doing something, you mean like doing something where you're not looking down at the keyboard?
Absolutely, yep. So starting with one of those patterns and then being comfortable with that and then forcing myself to look away from the keyboard using my peripheral vision.
Great, great. So it's worked. I know I've seen her confidence skyrocket over this last year, which is great. Okay. So what should I practice? I know that we talked about scales and arpeggios. I'm going to give you a listing of the kinds of scales that I have here. This book it says from beginner to professional. So we've been focusing on sort of the more beginning aspects, at least using sort of basic major scales and portions of those arpeggios and melodic thirds in major keys. But there are so many different patterns that can help you get fluidity on the keyboard that are really important. So I'm just gonna list off so you understand what we've got here. These are called basic technical exercises. So that's the only thing that's really required, let's say, for maybe Solo Fest or most universities like freshman year or maybe even high school, just major. But we also have natural minor, we have melodic minor, harmonic minor, which has the raised sixth and the raised seventh, pentatonic, the blues scale, an octatonic scale, which is comprised of half steps and whole steps, the whole tone scale, and then I suggest that you superimpose different rhythms on your scale. So we're going to stick with a scale, just a regular major scale. Okay, so let's try B flat.
Okay.
I'm going to have Alyssa play the B flat scale, but she's going to get a little bit outside of her comfort zone. Instead of playing it just in the straight eighth notes or quarter notes, I'm going to have her do 2 octaves. So I'm going to make sure she's standing in the middle of her 2-octave range. And yeah, before she plays, I want you to put your left mallet on the low B flat and your upper mallet on the top B flat, right? That shows you that you're standing in the middle, okay? So instead of playing just steady eighth notes, I'm going to have you play 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. All right?
Okay.
And it may or may not line up equally or evenly in that pattern. And you can make up the ending part to make it sound like it has a nice ending.
Yeah.
Great, great. So I've listed several like possible rhythms you can make up. I actually left a part blank at the bottom there where you can write in your own rhythms that you've made up. And then I also have several arpeggio types that you can practice as well as major. We have minor, dominant seventh, minor seventh, major seventh, augmented, diminished, and suspension. So you can really build up your vocabulary over time in all of those patterns. Another thing you can do on your scales is, so you, again, getting out of your comfort zone, is starting on a note that's not the tonic, so you get to see it in a different way. So I'm going to play B major, but I'm going to start on an F sharp instead. So here's the B major. Well, I wonder if I could see it, if I could start on F sharp. So I still have to see the shape, but it's a little bit trickier to start on that F sharp. Now, I'd like to just mention a couple things about arpeggios, which I think are some of the trickiest things to do well and consistently, especially on the way down. So after teaching for over 40 years now, I consistently see that people struggle with playing the correct pattern going from right to left. Playing left to right, going ascending on the arpeggios, not so hard, but the descending, one of my theories is that our eyes, for whatever reason, maybe because most of us in English read left to right, is they don't go from the right to left fast enough. So I suggest in problem solving this that you practice, for instance, just your descending arpeggios. Like walk into the room and say, okay, I'm in the key of, I'm going to play a key of A. I'm going to play my scale first. Whoa. That was incorrect, so I did it again. Now, if you're playing a 2-octave arpeggio and you start on your left hand, you're going to end up on the top A with your left hand. So what I suggest you do is see if you can do the descending only, maybe 4 times in a row. If you can do that 4 times in a row, then you've started seeing the pattern on the way down. I think it's one of my helpful tips in that. All right. And we do have some advanced skills in the back of the book. Again, how could everybody use this, use these skills? Well, let's say if you're doing an audition for something where you really have to play material and really play it correctly, and every note has to be correct every time that you play it. There are some more advanced skills in the back, and just by practicing over and over again using your metronome, you'll get more precision on whatever that you're practicing. So that could even go for an orchestral audition, for example. Some of the things that I've included at the end are arpeggio patterns that are connected. So they're not just in one key, they actually are, well, they're in one key, but they're 3 different chords. And I'm also a jazz musician, and I've always been interested in, you know, developing ways to be able to flow through, let's say, 2-5-1 changes on a jazz tune, because so many of those are made up of 2-5-1, or even pop songs, 4-5-1, for example. And it also gets you to see the changing patterns. So I'm just going to show you one of the examples of these connected arpeggios. This is the 2-5-1 progression, and I'm going to go up the 2, down the 5, and then up the 1 in the key of C. So the 2 chord is a D minor 7, the 5 chord is a G7, a G dominant 7, and the 1 chord I'm always going to put a major 7 on it because I like the sound, and I think I'm going to add a 6 at the end. So I'm going up the 2, down the 5, and then up the 1. And it gives me some nice fluidity in the key of C. And I could do it in another key. And you can go all the way around the circle. Actually, if you do that one, you have to do it in 2 halves, but you can learn your 2-5-1s. They also sound really nice as well. And a couple other things. How about some double stops? So when you're comfortable playing your melodic thirds, let's do in the key of E flat, okay?
Okay.
So double stops just means hitting 2 notes at once. It often happens in mallet music. And the thing you don't want to do is play a flam. So you want to use your full stroke. So just go ascending double stops at E flat.
Okay.
And go down again. Excellent. You notice she has nice consistency with both mallets hitting at the same time. Okay, great. Well, that's about as far as I was thinking of going today. I could give you some more details, but I'm curious to see if anybody has any questions, and I'm going to ask Alyssa to look in the chat for me. Any questions coming in?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. People are just astounded. Any more? No? Okay. Well, before we go then, hopefully I've given you some tools that are useful for your practice. I think it's really empowering to have something like a practice routine that you do consistently, with just the faith that if I do these things consistently, I'm going to improve. And you will actually see improvement even as short a time as a week. if you practice these things consistently, you're going to start to get better. It's also another tool is to videotape yourself while you play. What do I look like when I play? Can you see any tension in the arms? And a lot of the problems that we have in playing is related to tension. So being able to relax and just use your wrist. There's a little bit of arm, but mostly it's the wrist and not tensing up here. It also has to do with your posture. So make sure that you're not crowded over like this, but standing so your arms can flow freely as well.
The use of a mirror as well.
Good point. In the practice rooms, we do have mirrors where we can wheel the mallet instrument up in front of the mirror, and then you can actually double duty, right? You use the mirror as the focus area, so you're not looking at the keyboard, but you can actually watch your stroke, and you can learn a lot. You can actually be your own teacher if you use a mirror. That goes for snare drum and for timpani as well.
It is so helpful. It is so helpful, especially for grip problems. Like,
right.
Very helpful.
Right, because I think when you're on top of, it's hard to see your two hands and what the grip looks like. But if you're looking in the mirror, you can see, oh, maybe the pointer finger's out on one hand or not out on the other hand, for example. Good point. Very good point. The other things I have in the back of the book are, I've got practice guidelines that I've had my fellow professors ask me for. They're not just relevant to keyboard playing, but just how to use your practice time well. And that's really a lot of what I end up teaching is people can learn music. I end up teaching people how to practice so they can learn music more effectively. I also have what's called the circle of fifths. So there's a circle of keys, and it's really nice to be able to change it up every day and start in a different place on the circle, so you're working on different patterns. And the other thing I have for visual learners are the shapes of the scales, because that's the way I see them on the keyboard. I see them as ascending and descending shapes. Well, I think we've covered all the things I wanted to. I want to thank Alyssa thank you for your wonderful help today.
Of course.
We have a great time together. We're going to continue to do that. There's Heather back on the screen.
Thank you so much to Kristen and Alyssa, and thank you all for joining us today.